Can you take a guess at how many electric vehicle, also known as EV, charging stations are in Fairbanks? There are only 7 charging stations in this area, limiting options for EV owners. Anytime I see an electric vehicle in Alaska, I think, how practical is an EV in the cold climate of Alaska? To me, there are more practical options. Maybe you are considering purchasing an EV, maybe you want to help the environment by using an EV instead of using a gas or diesel powered vehicle. While in the lower 48 that would be considered appropriate and even helpful, but it is quite the opposite here in Alaska. Colder climate cannot properly support the needs of an EV or their owner, so drivers should not get an EV until infrastructure or environment allows for it. After my time of living in a cold climate such as Alaska, doing the research and being an engineering major, I have noticed the issues with the EVs. In this speech, I will be explaining the problems caused by owning an EV in a cold climate, the logistics of the infrastructure and why it can't support EVs, and why you should consider not purchasing an EV and rather consider buying a gas or diesel vehicle for Alaska's climate. So, why do EVs struggle in cold climates? Batteries are the main issue when it comes to the climate. When in colder temperatures, batteries degrade. Have you ever tried starting your gas or diesel powered vehicle after not using it for a while in the cold? Usually it doesn't start, and that's because when the battery is in the cold, it has an increased amperage, and because of this, it kills the battery much quicker when trying to start it. According to AutoCareLabs.com, cold weather slows everything down, including battery strength. Studies show that at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, battery strength reduces to 35%, whereas at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it decreases to 60%, with winters dipping into the negative 40s and negative 50s in interior Alaska. Now imagine that, but on a much larger scale and on a much larger battery. Just to even run the vehicle already requires a lot of amperage, which is how much resistance the wires give the electricity, which in turn consumes more power during the winter months. And that's only for below freezing. Now take Fairbanks, Alaska, negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit temps. According to the Tesla Model S manual from Wired.com, in cold weather, some of the stored energy in the battery may not be available on your drive because the battery is too cold. Now, this is more referencing temperatures only about 20 degrees. The colder a battery gets, the less power available to the user, which is supported by the general battery chart I found on greentechrenewables.com, which also shows that the colder it gets, the less battery capacity available to the user, which this is just a general battery rule, but it also applies to EV batteries as well. What about the infrastructure in Alaska itself? How does infrastructure affect owning an EV? In all of Alaska, the many places I've been, Talkeetna, Palmer, Anchorage, Fairbanks, etc., I have never seen an EV charging station, which, considering how much I drive around for fun, just looking for them is surprising. Upon further research, I found that there are only 7 charging stations, we'll refer to these as CSs for now, in Fairbanks, 1 CS in Talkeetna, 88 CSs in Anchorage, granted this is a warmer climate, and further south, 37 CSs in Juneau, further south as well, 0 CSs in Willow, 3 CSs in Wasilla. All info can be found from plugshare.com. This compared to some of the lower 48 cities, like for example New York City has 9,314 CSs, and Los Angeles, California has 5,459 CSs. It seems the warmer and more south you go in Alaska and in general the whole United States, the more CSs you find, which makes sense as it references my previous point. Colder weather also affects charging effectiveness as well as the capacity of the battery. So there would be less need for it until they can find the infrastructure for it. According to the data chart on AlaskaWatchman.com, Alaska ranks 40th place on the number of EVs being sold, meaning the actual demand for CSs in our infrastructure is very low, which helps explain why our infrastructure doesn't quite support EVs yet. Because the need for CSs are so low, it is less likely that there will be funding for putting CSs in locations that don't have them. Overall, the need for CSs is super low, not many people own an EV, only around 2,538 car owners have an EV in Alaska according to AFTC.energy.gov, and are willing to use it during the cold winter months of Fairbanks, Alaska. For comparison, California has 1,178,948 EV owners, and Texas has 210,433 EV owners. So what are some better alternatives to EVs that live up to the harshness of Alaska's cold temperatures? Gas and diesel are two well-known fuel sources for vehicles, both of which may not have the upsides of an EV, but they can withstand the climate of Alaska much better than EVs can for several reasons. Let me paint a picture for you. You're driving your nice EV down the college campus road. It is negative 50 degrees outside, and you're nice and cozy and warm in your car. Your Tesla Model S says it is running out of battery, and you are still 50 miles away from the next charging station. And your Tesla says it only has 10 miles left. That sounds like an uncomfortable situation, correct? Well, gas and diesel powered vehicles will not have that issue. Their power source will have the same effectiveness in colder climates as they do in warm climates. They may be hard to start, most vehicles are in the cold, but once they start, they are on until they run out of fuel. As RedXadditives.com states, while yes, cold weather does inhibit motor vehicles of all sorts, but it does not inhibit the fuel economy as much as something like an EV. An EV can lose up to 40% fuel economy in the cold, possibly more, while a fuel-powered vehicle only loses about 50% of fuel economy in the cold. So while EVs can lose half or more of their fuel mileage, gas or diesel-powered vehicles can only lose around a seventh of their fuel mileage. While yes, those vehicles have many more fluids that can become more sluggish in the cold, in the end they are more effective in the winter months than EVs. According to fueleconomy.gov, gas-powered vehicles lose about 15% of their gas mileage, while electric-powered vehicles lose around 39 to 40% of their fuel mileage. And since heating the cabin consumes more energy for an EV, it can further decrease the fuel mileage. For gas and diesel-powered vehicles, all accessories in the vehicle run off of the serpentine belt, meaning it's not taking extra energy to heat the vehicle, while to power the accessories for an EV, it's taking power directly from the source. Overall, EVs are a wonderful car and great for protecting the environment, but people in colder climate that are considering buying a vehicle should not buy an EV. Because the cold climate will affect them more than gas or diesel powered vehicles, the infrastructure in these colder climates, such as Fairbanks, Alaska, cannot support EVs, and gas and diesel vehicles are much more suited to the demands of colder climates. So EVs are not suited for colder climates such as Alaska, and consumers should not buy an EV until they are better supported. So what vehicle will you purchase, and how will this affect your future car buying decisions?